My name is Rose Weintraub, and I'm presenting on Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. The objectives of today's lesson are to identify the 8 stages of human emotional and psychological development described by psychologist Erik Erikson, and 2, to analyze each of the 8 stages of development and their effect on human emotional development. The guiding questions for today's lesson are: what is Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development? What are some of the key components of each stage in Erikson's theory? And to analyze the role that conflict plays in the milestones in our lives. Is there a positive side to conflict, and how does this relate to Erikson's theory? To start off with, we're going to do a class brainstorm. What are some important physical, emotional, and social milestones in the life of a human being? For example, a birth, a high school graduation, a marriage. So some of the responses that the class came up with are a new home, children, traveling, getting a new business. With a partner, I want you to discuss whether each milestone is due to physical, emotional, social factors, or a combination of all the factors. The milestones that we discussed in the bell ringer and the social, emotional, and physical factors that compose them have been studied by psychologists for a long time, and the psychologists have developed theories regarding the relationships between aging and emotional and social development. Sigmund Freud was known as the founding father of psychoanalysis, which also studies some of these factors. This video is going to discuss some of his key points.
Sigmund Freud is one of the most famous names in psychology. Even though most of his ideas have been abandoned by modern psychology, his psychoanalytic theory formed the basis for many current psychodynamic theories. Freud was the first to discuss the unconscious mind and its role in human behavior. Freud believed that there were 3 levels of consciousness. First is the unconscious mind, which exists outside of your awareness at all times. Next is the preconscious mind, which includes all information that you are not currently aware of, but that can be recalled. Finally, the conscious mind is your current state of awareness. Remember the cartoons you used to watch as a child? The main character is confronted with a choice. On his left shoulder is a little devil pushing him toward a bad choice. On his right shoulder, a little angel is encouraging him to make a good choice. He is stuck in the middle and forced to make a decision that will affect him. This scenario is much like Freud's theory of personality. There are 3 parts to personality, according to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory. These are the id, superego, and ego. The id is the first to develop, the ego is second, and the superego is the last to develop. The id is the biological component of the personality and includes your instincts. The id operates in our unconscious mind. It is like the little devil sitting on the cartoon character's shoulder that's always selfish and needy. It operates according to the pleasure principle. The pleasure principle is the idea that all of your needs should be met immediately. Then there's the superego. The superego exists in all 3 levels of consciousness. The superego is like the little angel. It is always concerned with what is socially acceptable. The superego pushes you to obtain the ego ideal, or your view of what is right. It also represents your conscience, or your view of what is considered to be wrong. Finally, we have the ego. The ego operates in your preconscious and conscious mind. The ego is part of the personality that makes your decisions. This is like the cartoon character in the example. The ego is in the middle, makes the decision, and faces the consequences. The ego operates according to the reality principle. The reality principle is the idea that the desires of the id
While Freud may have been the founding father of psychoanalysis, psychologist Erik Erikson refined and expanded upon Freud's theories, focusing on the influence of society and culture on human personality. In his theory of psychosocial development, it holds that there are 8 stages of personality. Personality develops in a predetermined order and builds with age upon each previous stage. Each stage of a person's life is characterized by a different psychological crisis or conflict that must be resolved before progression to the next stage. The conflict exists between the biological and social cultural forces in each stage. So just like in how we have the bell ringer with the different milestones, and each of these milestones was affected by different types of factors, in Erikson's theory, he holds that there are different factors that influence the conflict at each stage. If an individual does indeed successfully reconcile these forces and resolve that conflict, he or she emerges from the stage with the corresponding virtue. If a person does not resolve a crisis, it will continue to affect the person's development throughout life.
Mary has a 3-month-old daughter. Mary bottle feeds her child and follows a strict schedule for feeding times. The child is not allowed to have a pacifier. Mary is an affectionate parent, and all of her child's needs are met. How could the actions that occur in the child's life now affect her later development? Sigmund Freud's psychosexual theory and Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory are 2 important psychoanalytic theories on human development that could be used to explain the developmental effects of this scenario. In this lesson, we will examine what these 2 theories have in common and how they differ. Erikson's theory followed Freud's, and it was based on many of Freud's ideas. Because of this, the 2 theories have similarities. Both theorists recognize the importance of the unconscious on development. They also both separate development into stages of a person's life and utilize similar age divisions for these developmental stages. However, there are several differences that exist between the names of the stages and the developmental issues that are encountered during each stage. Part of the reason for this is that each psychologist has his own unique view of what drives a person's development. Freud's psychosexual theory emphasizes the importance of basic needs and biological forces, while Erikson's psychosocial theory is based upon social and environmental factors. Erikson also expands his theory into adulthood, while Freud's theory ends at an earlier period. Now let's briefly look at Freud's psychosexual stages and Erikson's psychosocial stages alongside each other. First, we'll examine the first year of life. Freud called this the oral stage of development because he believed that oral stimulation was the primary means of development at this time. Erikson called this stage of development trust versus mistrust. Both believe that a child develops their sense of trust at this stage of development. Next, let's discuss the 1st through 3rd years of life. Freud called this the anal stage of development, and Erikson called this autonomy versus shame and doubt. Both believe that a sense of independence is learned at this stage of development, and that toilet training is an important focus of independence. Parental attitudes at this time can also have a lasting effect. Ages 3 through 6 is referred to as the phallic stage by Freud, and the initiative versus guilt stage by Erikson. Freud believed this stage was where a child identifies with the same-sex parent and develops self-esteem. Erikson felt that this was the stage where a child begins to exert power and control over their environment. This is the point where you will start to see more differences in the 2 theories. The next developmental stage occurs at ages 7 through 11. Freud calls this stage of development latency and believes that this is an intermediary stage of development where the child forms interactions with their environment. Erikson refers to it as industry versus inferiority. He believes that children begin to demonstrate their ability to succeed. Ages 12 through 18 mark the next stage of development. According to Freud, this is the final stage, and it continues throughout a person's life. He calls it the genital stage. During this stage, he believes a person seeks balance between their biological instincts and sense of morality. In other words, Freud believes that a person learns to channel their biological instincts into socially acceptable displays of love and career goals. Erikson called this stage identity versus role confusion. He believed it was a period where the focus of development shifts to social bonding in order to establish meaning in one's life and assert individuality. While Freud felt that the developmental stages end at this point, Erikson continues with 3 more stages which occur throughout adulthood. These additional stages are intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. During these stages, a person seeks to establish an intimate relationship and become a productive member of society. Ultimately, there is reflection upon the goals they have accomplished in their lifetime. Let's think about Mary's 3-month-old again. You now know that both Freud and Erikson believe that a sense of trust is gained at this stage of development. But they would predict a different outcome. Because Freud believes that biological needs are the driving force behind development, he would predict that the child may not be getting enough oral gratification. No breastfeeding, a lack of a pacifier, and a strict feeding schedule may cause her to be mistrustful and have a difficult time forming relationships later in life. Since Erikson bases his theory on social factors, he would see the situation differently. As long as she was not hungry and was receiving the needed attention, an adequate sense of trust would be formed and built upon. In conclusion, both theories share similarities as well as differences. Both Erikson and Freud agreed that human development occurs in distinct stages. They chose similar ages that mark these stages of development. This makes it easy to compare each theorist's stages of development to one another. Both theorists also recognized unconscious factors in development. However, while Freud believed that human development is shaped by our biological drives, Erikson places more emphasis on social experiences in determining an individual's development. According to Erikson's theory, both early and late life experiences are equally important to an individual's development. In contrast, Freud felt that our early developmental experiences were more important than experiences later in life.
On this chart, we have the 8 stages of Erikson's theory. As you can see, each stage is characterized by a different age span, starting with infancy and going all the way to old age. The next column is the conflict. At each of these stages is a conflict between 2 opposite forces. So again, you can see in infancy, for example, basic trust versus mistrust, and old age, integrity versus despair. At the end of each conflict, and at the resolution of the conflict, you achieve the virtue for that corresponding stage. And finally, the culmination old age, which represents the qualities that virtue will help you achieve if you successfully pass through all these stages in Erikson's theory. On the chart that you have, I have already filled out the first example for you. I'm going to fill out the second example for you, going over the second stage and the conflict and virtue and culmination. You guys are going to, together with me, do the next 2 stages. With a partner, you're going to do the last 2 stages, or the second to last stages, and on your own, you're going to do the last 2 stages. Now that you're almost done with the chart, we're going to break off into differentiated instruction. There's going to be 3 groups. Group 1 is the technology group. Using the internet, you guys are going to select one of the stages of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development and fill out the remainder of the chart. Group 2, you guys are the independent group. You are going to write about a time you experienced conflict. How did this conflict impact you, and what did you learn? Group 3 is going to be working with me, and you're going to read the article on Erikson's theory and answer the guided questions using the article along with the class notes that we took earlier.